Welcome back to Stories Behind the Silence, where we unpack the quiet heroes, the untold sacrifices, and the small acts that change lives. Today's episode, the single dad who gave his last meal to a stranger. But before we get to that twist, let's pause and look at the man himself. The hum of the city was always quieter in the early morning. Fog still clung to the ground like a thin blanket wrapping the streets in a soft stillness that would be gone by the time the world fully woke. In a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the edge of downtown, Jacob Turner quietly closed the front door behind him, careful not to wake the sleeping figure curled under a pink blanket on the worn couch. His daughter Emily was 6 years old and had a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. But mornings like this, when he had to sneak out before sunrise to make it to his first job, reminded Jacob just how much of her life he was missing. He paused by the door for a moment, slipping a small note under her lunchbox. It was a habit now, a scribbled drawing, a smiley face, a stick-figure dad with a heart balloon, just something to remind her that he was thinking of her even when he wasn't there. His boots hit the pavement a little heavier than usual. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the lack of food. Last night they'd split the last packet of instant noodles and a bruised apple. He had told Emily he wasn't hungry. She didn't question him. The walk to his first job took 20 minutes. It was a custodial shift at a downtown office building, scrubbing floors and taking out trash before the employees arrived in their polished shoes and pressed suits. Jacob worked like a man who knew time was money, and he had no extra time to spare. By 8:00 a.m., he was off to his second job, delivering groceries for an app that barely paid enough after gas and fees. He drove a beat-up sedan that coughed more than it purred, the back seat full of old toys wrappers and a spare booster seat for Emily. He worked in silence, watching the city blur by through a cracked windshield. As he waited for orders, he thumbed through photos on his phone. Emily's birthday at the park, her first day of school, her gap-toothed smile that never failed to anchor him. At noon, Jacob stopped by a street vendor and used his last $4.85 to buy a sandwich and a bottle of water. It would be his only meal for the day. He sat on a cold bench in the park near his third gig, helping at a warehouse part-time, and unwrapped the sandwich with quiet gratitude. That's when he saw her. She sat on the opposite end of the bench, wrapped in a long coat that was clearly expensive, but now rain-stained and wrinkled. Her hair was messy and her face was pale beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She looked out of place, and she looked hungry. Jacob tried not to stare, but something in her eyes, something distant and hollow, pulled at him. She noticed him looking and offered a faint smile. He smiled back, then looked down at the sandwich in his lap. He didn't want to do it, but he knew he would. "Miss," he said, offering the sandwich. "You okay?" She hesitated as if unsure how to respond. He nodded at the sandwich. "Take it. You look like you need it more than I do." I couldn't," she said, but her voice cracked. "You can," he replied gently, "and you should." She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to see if there was a catch. Then slowly she took the sandwich. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't have to." "Maybe not," Jacob said, standing. "But it's the right thing." He tossed the bottle of water to her too and gave a small wave. "Take care." He didn't wait to see if she ate. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't even think about how he'd make it through the rest of the day on an empty stomach. Because to Jacob Turner, doing good didn't require recognition. And he had a little girl waiting at home who'd ask, as she always did, "Did you do something kind today, Daddy?" He wanted to be able to say yes. He had no idea that the woman on the bench wasn't just a stranger. She was Rachel Luth, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and she would remember his kindness forever. Jacob didn't normally take his breaks. His job as a janitor kept him moving, and with rent overdue and his daughter's school lunch account nearly empty, sitting still felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. But that afternoon, the weight of it all caught up with him. He wandered out of the back entrance of the building and collapsed onto the nearest park bench, half shadowed by a maple tree just beginning to turn with autumn. The sun filtered through its thinning leaves, painting gold on the pavement. From the brown paper bag in his hand, he pulled out the last of what he had: half a sandwich and a small container of leftover stew from a coworker's kindness. It wasn't much, but it was warm. Across the park, a woman in a navy hoodie and faded jeans sat hunched forward, her eyes low, her body still. She looked lost. She hadn't moved for several minutes. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup that was clearly empty. Jacob hesitated. She might be dangerous. She might be scamming. He knew all the warnings, but he also knew hunger when he saw it. He stood up, walked over, and without a word offered the sandwich. The woman looked up startled. Her face was streaked with the kind of fatigue that ran deeper than sleep could fix. But her eyes, they lit up. "Are you sure?" she asked. He nodded. "It's not much. But Eve had worse days with less food." She smiled faintly. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a few moments. She took careful bites, not rushing. He watched the wind lift a few strands of her hair. Rachel," she said eventually. "Jacob." "You work around here?" He nodded again. "Maintenance. Cleaning mostly." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you gave me your only meal." He shrugged. "I've learned something. Empty stomachs don't scare me, but empty hearts, that's harder to live with." She blinked, visibly moved. They didn't speak much after that. Eventually Rachel stood, thanked him again, and walked away slowly, her footsteps steady, now not dragging. Jacob didn't know he'd just handed his meal to the CEO, and Rachel didn't know she'd just met the man who would soon change everything she thought she knew about leadership, kindness, and what it meant to truly serve. The walk home that evening felt longer than usual. Jacob's stomach growled, but it was quieter than his thoughts. He didn't regret giving away the food. He never did when his heart made the choice. But the weight of responsibility always followed. Emily was waiting at home, and all he had was a half-empty pantry and promises he hoped he could keep. He stopped by the corner store, digging into his pocket. A few coins, not enough for dinner. Maybe a single loaf of bread if it was still on discount. As he left with a small bundle of bread wrapped in plastic, the clerk gave him a look, a mix of pity and familiarity. Jacob had been coming here too often with too little. Back at home, Emily greeted him at the door, eyes bright despite the dim light. "Daddy, you're home." He ruffled her hair. "I brought bread." She grinned. "Can we toast it with honey?" There was just enough left in the jar. They sat together, feet dangling off their tiny kitchen stools, sharing toast like it was a feast. Jacob watched her chew and laugh at her own sticky fingers. He smiled, tucking away the gnawing hunger. Her joy was enough for now. Later that night, as Emily slept with her stuffed rabbit under one arm, Jacob sat by the window. He replayed the moment with Rachel in the park. He hadn't given her the meal to feel noble. He simply couldn't bear to watch someone go hungry, not while he still had something left to offer. Kindness, he thought, wasn't meant to be convenient. It was most powerful when it cost you something. He didn't know it yet, but Rachel had been deeply changed by that moment. It wasn't the sandwich, it was the why behind it. It challenged everything she'd been taught about worth and success. The next day, she would begin asking questions, and Jacob's quiet gesture, born out of nothing but heart, would echo into corridors he had never walked. Because when you give with nothing left, something greater always returns. Rachel sat in her corner office, but she couldn't focus. The skyline sprawled outside the window, yet her eyes kept drifting back to that park bench. The leaves, the fading light, the quiet dignity in a stranger's eyes. She'd come to that bench to escape. After a board meeting that left her questioning her own values, she'd pulled on a hoodie and vanished into the city to think. That's when Jacob found her. Or maybe she thought that's when I found him. Who was he? No name badge. No company ID. Just a kindness that didn't ask for anything. Rachel called her assistant. "I need a name. A name, the janitor who works maintenance for our building. Tall, maybe early 40s. He was in the park yesterday." Her assistant paused. "I'll see what I can do." Rachel spent the rest of the day restless. She walked the halls more than usual. She passed by the lower-level maintenance wing. No sign of him. Then that evening she went back to the bench. Empty. But on the bench was a folded napkin. She opened it. A child's drawing. A little girl holding hands with a man. Underneath, in uneven crayon letters, "Me and Daddy." Rachel clutched it to her chest. She wasn't just searching for a name anymore. She was searching for a story. The next morning she visited the custodial office herself. When she asked for Jacob, a supervisor narrowed his eyes. "Why I met him?" Briefly, he made an impression. "Most don't notice the janitors," the man said. I know, that's part of the problem. Jacob wasn't on shift. He only worked nights. But Rachel left a note I'd like to talk. Not about work. About life. R. That evening, Jacob returned from another exhausting shift. He found the note in his locker. He read it twice. Then again. He didn't know what it meant. But part of him, some quiet, intuitive part, knew this was just about a thank you. It was the beginning of something else. Jacob hesitated outside the employee entrance, Rachel's note still folded in his back pocket. The words "not about work" puzzled him. People like her didn't usually seek people like him unless there was a spill to mop or a light to fix. Still, he knocked softly on the glass. Rachel was already waiting. She stood from her chair, not with the poise of a CEO, but with the nervous energy of someone about to take a risk. "Hi," she said simply. "Thank you for coming." Jacob gave a careful nod. "You left a note." "I did." She motioned to the seat across from her desk. "Would you sit?" He did slowly. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" She smiled. "No, far from it." There was a beat of silence, then Rachel leaned forward. "I've thought about that moment in the park more than I care to admit. What you did, it shifted something in me." Jacob looked down, modest. "It was just lunch." "No," she said. "It was compassion, rare and unfiltered." She paused, then added, "Do you mind telling me a bit more about you?" Jacob wasn't used to sharing, but something in her tone, earnest, vulnerable, made it feel safe. He told her about Emily, about juggling 3 jobs, about the late wife he still spoke to in his dreams. He didn't embellish, just the facts. Rachel listened with more attention than most executives gave quarterly reports. When he finished, she whispered, "You live with more grace than many who have everything." Then came the offer. Not a job, not charity, a conversation, ongoing. "I'm rethinking how I lead. I think you can help me. Not as staff, but as someone who's lived where few dare to look. Would you be willing to talk with me again?" Jacob blinked. "You want to learn from me?" She nodded. "I already have. I just want to understand more." That night, Jacob walked home under the stars, unsure of what just happened. But deep down, something settled. Maybe the world wasn't as closed off as he thought. Maybe stories like his were finally ready to be heard. Rachel didn't sleep much the night after their conversation. Jacob's humility haunted her in the best way. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily society overlooked people like him, hard-working, kind-hearted, and nearly invisible. The next morning, she made a call. Start drafting a position. Something new. Something real. Her assistant hesitated. For who, Jacob? Rachel had already cleared her morning. She waited outside the employee entrance at the end of Jacob's shift. He saw her from across the alley, surprised. "You again, I told you I wasn't finished learning," she said with a small smile. "I'm guessing this isn't just a friendly visit." "No, I want to offer you something." They walked to the coffee shop nearby, a modest place with worn tables and forgiving lighting. "I'm creating a new position," Rachel said, sliding a paper toward him. "Community Experience Liaison. It's more than a title. It's a way to connect the leadership of our company to the people. Our decisions affect the workers, the families, the overlooked." Jacob blinked at the page. "I don't have a degree or training." Rachel shook her head. "That's the point. You have something rarer, perspective, lived experience, empathy." He looked uncertain. "Why me?" "Because you live the values most companies only pretend to champion." Jacob didn't answer right away. He thought about Emily, about stability, about dignity. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay, but I'm not dressing up in a suit." Rachel laughed. "Deal." By the time they left the coffee shop, the sun had risen, fully casting long golden rays across the sidewalk. It felt like a beginning, for both of them. Jacob's first few days in the new role were a whirlwind. He shadowed department heads, attended staff meetings, and began documenting how policies affected real employees. Rachel encouraged him to speak freely, but not everyone was as welcoming. There were whispers. Who is he? Wasn't he just cleaning floors last week? Why is he in this meeting? Even among those who were polite, Jacob felt the undercurrent of skepticism. He didn't blame them. It wasn't easy to accept someone who hadn't climbed the same ladder. But he kept showing up, listening, asking questions no one else thought to ask. One afternoon during a strategy session, Jacob pointed out a flaw in a new operations plan that would affect overnight workers. Rachel nodded in agreement, but the VP of operations frowned. With respect, Jacob, he said, you don't understand the complexities of these systems. Jacob leaned forward calmly. With respect, I've mopped the floors in the back hallway, where the overnight crew eats their dinner from vending machines because the cafeteria closes too early. Maybe the system is too complex if it can't make room for basic needs. The room fell silent. Rachel smiled. Later that day, she met Jacob in the hallway. That was bold, she said. Was it too much, he asked. No, she replied. It was exactly right, but it stirred some discomfort. Change always does. Jacob sighed. I'm not trying to fight. I just don't want people like me to be forgotten. Rachel nodded. Then don't stop speaking, even if the room gets quieter when you do. The fallout came swiftly. The VP of operations, still bruised from Jacob's challenge, began quietly undermining him. Emails were forwarded out of context. Meeting times were accidentally changed without informing him. A few influential voices started questioning Rachel's judgment. He's a nice guy, one board member murmured, but is he really qualified? The pressure mounted. Jacob noticed fewer smiles in the hallway, more closed doors. Even the janitorial staff, his old crew, kept their distance, unsure how to treat the man who used to mop beside them, but now had an office on the 12th floor. Rachel called him in one morning. They're pushing back, she said plainly. I expected that, Jacob replied, but I didn't expect it to hurt this much. Rachel leaned forward. You have a choice. You can step away quietly, or you can weather this storm and show them why I believed in you. Jacob looked at the window behind her. The city stretched endlessly, full of people who would never be heard in boardrooms. I didn't take this job to be liked, he said. I took it to make sure no one else gets overlooked like I was. That afternoon, Jacob walked into a department-wide town hall. Without notes, without slides, he told his story. He spoke of nights skipping meals so his daughter could eat, of cleaning offices where no one knew his name, of a stranger who accepted his last sandwich with grace and gave him a second chance. By the end, the room was still. A quiet clap began, then another, and another. Redemption didn't come through victory. It came through truth. And Jacob had just reminded everyone what it looked like. With the dust beginning to settle after the town hall, Jacob found himself in a new light, respected but still watched. His story had moved people, but now expectations were higher. Rachel met with him to outline a plan. We have momentum, she said. Let's use it to build something real. Jacob proposed an internal mentorship program, lower-wage employees paired with leaders for monthly conversations. It started small 10 pairings. Then 20. Word spread. For the first time, executives were hearing firsthand what life looked like below the boardroom. One janitor shared how they'd been saving for a single laptop for their daughter for over a year. One cafeteria worker opened up about juggling 2 jobs while caring for a disabled parent. The program didn't solve everything, but it changed perspectives. Jacob also began visiting each department weekly, taking notes, asking questions no one else asked. Slowly, attitudes shifted. The VP, who once dismissed him, now nodded thoughtfully when Jacob spoke. One day after a particularly honest exchange, the VP even said, "You're making us better. Uncomfortable, but better." At home, things were changing too. Emily asked one evening, "Daddy, do you like your new job?" Jacob thought for a moment. "It's hard, but I think helping people be seen." She grinned, like a superhero. He laughed, maybe a quiet one. As the days passed, Jacob still felt the weight of responsibility, but it was no longer a burden. It was purpose. He had lost a meal once, but he had found a mission. Spring arrived with a quiet sense of victory. The halls of the company felt different, not just because of the initiatives Jacob had spearheaded, but because people had begun to see each other. Jacob's role officially expanded into Director of People Engagement, a title Rachel created just for him. His office moved to a more central floor, not high in the executive tower, but close to operations. He requested it that way. On the first day in the new space, he brought Emily with him. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her scan the modest office. She tapped the window. You can see the buses from here. I like it. That evening, Rachel hosted a company-wide dinner, a celebration of their recent cultural transformation. There were no suits, no formal speeches, just music, laughter, and food served by both executives and interns alike. Jacob found himself next to Rachel, both holding plates of barbecue. "I've been thinking," she said, "about that day in the park. Why did you really give away your meal?" He shrugged, then smiled. "I guess I didn't want someone to feel forgotten." She nodded. "Neither did I. That's why I sat down beside you." The night air was warm, and the city lights danced off nearby buildings. Jacob looked around at co-workers who once doubted him now, laughing with factory staff, at Emily running with other kids on the grass. A new beginning wasn't just a title or a job. It was a change of heart, one man, then another, then many. And it all started with a sandwich.